You're on Radio 97. It's time to talk law with our resident lawyer, Despina Priala of boutique law firm Priala Legal in Runaway Bay. She's with us every Thursday morning. She brings all her textbooks and all her legal expertise, and she provides some general advice on the latest hot topics. She has experience that spans more than 25 years in the area of property and commercial law. She also prepares wills as part of estate planning and litigation. With us on this Thursday morning. Hi, Despina.
Good morning, Wayne. Good morning, Brooke.
Good morning, Despina. Good morning, Wayno. This morning we have a hot topic starting off with buying off the plan. So, Despina, you've worked very hard to put together a power checklist, which I love the name you've given it. But basically, it's your top tips for buyers that are thinking of buying off the plan.
Yes, I don't know whether I've worked really hard. What I've done for this
You
segment.
do this all the time.
Yeah,
I do this.
Nothing.
Exactly. I do this all the time. What I want to do is share what I provide to buyers every day of the week. And that's why I call it the power checklist, because this is something that I have formulated over time. Sure. So I've spent a lot of time and effort doing it, but it's my current checklist. I've had it for a while. I really love it. And it forms the basis for me to be able to advise buyers on buying off the plan on any project. And it's really, really valuable. And it's really come to my attention over the last few months. I've had several buyers come to me after they are already under a contract where we didn't advise them. They use someone else, and they've got into a bit of trouble or dispute with the developer, I should say. And then they've come to me and said, look, can you help us? And then one thing leads to another, where I find out that they actually never got any advice prior to signing the contract, or they got very little advice. And when I take them through what I normally take buyers through, they go, well, I didn't know any of this. I didn't understand any of this. No one told me this. So I thought, you know what, why don't I share with the listeners what I do with buyers? And then if they're currently considering going under and off the plan contract or are already under contract, they can compare. And really, they should be taking away from this segment that, well, this is the type of advice that they really need to have obtained upfront, or should in the future, because it's quite detailed, it's quite specific, and every buyer should have the opportunity to have this.
Okay, so pen and piece of paper at the ready.
So one thing leads to another. So some things might seem basic, but they do have a flow-on effect. Okay, so you want to obviously hear the whole segment. So obviously you want your lawyer to have read the contract and the disclosure material. Sounds basic, but yes, each project's different. So what are you buying? You're buying vacant land? Are you buying a unit in a mid-rise, in a high-rise, a townhouse? What is it? So every contract's different, and the disclosure material is going to be different and unique for that project. And remember, off the plan means you're buying something sight unseen. You're buying something that's not constructed, not built. And what you're doing is you're relying on representations by the developer. So typically you'll have buyers walk into a display centre, right? And they're all over the Gold Coast at the moment for various projects that we're aware of. And they go in and they have a look at what the developer is putting on display as to, this is what we're going to build. And these are the representations that we're making. And buyers go away going, wow, that looks fantastic. And then we start the process of, well, let's get the contract and the disclosure material, take you through it, because if there's a dispute or an issue we have to resolve, we go to the contract terms, not what was in the display centre, 12 months ago or 2 years ago. It's what is in writing that counts. And that's an important point to note. So obviously the basic terms are the purchase price, what your deposit is. It's typically 10% deposit. How is that paid? Okay, and this seems like a basic thing, but typically in off the plan, you've got to put a holding deposit down, and then you've got to pay your balance deposit, say in 7 days or 14 days or 21 days from the contract date, whatever the developer allows. Typically, if it's a big sum, you see a lot of people have their money tied up in term deposits, or they've got to get the funds some elsewhere released. And if you don't pay on time, it's considered a breach. So I tell buyers, well, straight up, you've got to understand that you've got a commitment to pay the balance 10% within a certain time frame. If you don't pay it, you're in default. So that could mean that whatever you have paid to date can be forfeited and given to the developer, right? So it's really important to understand that. A lot of buyers have the assumption that, well, the contract's not really binding until I pay my full deposit. Well, yes and no. You've signed a contract, you're committed, and you've got to pay the balance. So it is considered a binding contract typically, and yes, it's a breach if you don't pay. So really important. Then what we do is we actually look at the plans, right? So I'm not a surveyor or a builder, but I can read plans, because if you advising buyers and off the plan, you've got to read the plans to a certain extent. You've got to understand what the client or the buyer is buying. For example, what's the apartment number? Sounds basic, but let's keep going. What level is it on? Okay, what aspect is it? So when I say aspect, I'm saying, is it north, south, east, or west facing balcony? So typically buyers buy apartments based on the view, right? The aspect, and they come and go, yes, my balcony is facing south or southeast or north. So you want to have a look at the plan, be able to read a plan to then say, yep, the plan shows that it's going to be facing this aspect, right? Then you've got to look at the size. You've got to be able to read the plan that tells you the total square meterage, right? So you've got to be able to understand plans. What's the size of the balcony? Let's have a look at that. Yeah. Do you get a car park with it? Or do you get two? Do you get a storage area as exclusive use? So that's all part of reading the contract. Very, very important. Okay. Is it a 1-bedder, 2-bedder, 3-bedder, 3.5 bedder? Does it have a bath? Does it not have a bath? You've got to be able to read floor plans and understand that. If it's a townhouse, is it double garage, single garage? Is there a carport? So these are all the things that are really important to buyers to understand.
Yep. And you can understand why that's so daunting for people who've never done it before.
Absolutely. And if you're not getting any advice or very little advice, you're not being given the opportunity to make an informed decision. Should I buy this or should I not buy this? Because going under off the plan is risky. There's always risks in every contract, but particularly off the plan, there are certain degrees of risks that aren't associated with buying normal property that is registered. So you need to understand what they are. And you can't really understand what that is until you get proper advice. So we keep going. A big issue we have to obviously explain to buyers is the sunset date. We've talked about that before on the show. What is the sunset date? So is it 3 years? Is it 3.5? Is it 4? Is it 5.5 years? So really important, because when you're buying off the plan, the buyers need to understand that the mentality of going into and off the plan is this, that you go into contract, you get a cooling off period of 5 business days, yes. Then after you pass that cooling off period, you are locked in, Eddie. Right? That's what I say to buyers. You're locked in, Eddie, all the way to the end. And if that means the maximum time period of the sunset date, then you need to understand that you can't walk away from your contract. You can't get out of your contract. If you have a change in your personal circumstances, you lose your job, you go through a divorce, someone dies, unless it's one of the buyers that dies, that's different. The developer doesn't care. And I say that quite directly, that, well, you've signed a contract. You have to know what you're signing, understand it. If you have a change later and you want to get out of your contract, developer's not just going to say, yeah, sure, you can get out of your contract. It doesn't work like that, right? So you've got to understand the mindset of, what is the sunset date? Can it be extended? The maximum time frame in Queensland is 5.5 years, right? So what is your sunset date in your contract? Because you cannot really terminate your contract until you get past that sunset date. And if the project's not completed by the end of that sunset date, then yes, you can terminate typically and get your deposit back, right? So it's an important aspect, because people go into off the plans going, you know what, I'm happy to sit for 3 years. I'm happy to sit for 4 years. I'm happy to do that, right? But they need to understand that, right? And some people go into it thinking, oh, but the agent or one of the representatives of the developer told me, oh, this will be finished in 2 years. Okay, but what's the sunset date say in the contract? Because that's the maximum time, right, that you have to wait. Yeah, really important. Also, a schedule of finishes is always important. You should go through that with your lawyer. Do you get a pre-settlement inspection right just prior to settlement? Very important. What is the defect clauses look like? So do you have to, in your pre-settlement inspection, there are usually 2 different types of clauses we see. You have to give a list of defects that you say are defects from your pre-settlement inspection before you settle, to have the developer remedy those if he agrees, or you get an option to do it after settlement. Really important and critical, because if it has to be done before settlement and you don't do it, you lose your opportunity then. Some contracts give you 90 days after settlement to give you a list of defects. So these are all important and critical things that should be discussed. Deposit, another important thing. Is the deposit invested? Typically it is. Who gets the interest? right? And the interest rates the way they are now, you could actually earn, if it was like 3 or 4 years down the track, you'd actually earn a decent amount from your 10% deposit. So if the contract says that the developer gets the interest, is that right? Is it fair? Should the interest be shared, or should it all go to the buyer? Right? So those are the things that we talk about, that I talk about with buyers, that are really, really important. Risk, insurance is a big aspect as well. When do you start paying your outgoings? Is land tax something that's adjusted? These are all very important issues that we talk about. Does the developer have a right to terminate at any time? So these are all very important, critical issues to talk about. So that's just like a little glimpse into my power checklist. If you're hearing this and you're going, wow, I didn't get any of this advice when I signed my off the plan contract. Yeah, then you didn't get proper advice. So perhaps best to look into that straight away. And if you're considering going into an off the plan, maybe come and see me or someone else that's quite experienced and off the plan.
We'll see you, Despina, we'll promise. No, great power checklist there. Thank you, Despina. And coming up next, body corporate cases that have put some Gold Coasters in some really sticky situations. That's coming up on Talking Law. Don't go anywhere.